Right, so hello and welcome back to Books and Things and welcome to another video. And today I wanted to talk about some books that I've been working on recently. So for those of you who don't know, I work in publishing. I work at Bonnier Books UK for the imprints Zaffa and Manila Press. I'm an assistant editor, so I do quite a lot of editing, quite a lot of desk editing, which is like sorting out copy editing and proofreading and all of that stuff, and I do quite a lot of like administration and support and stuff as well. So I work on quite a lot of different books. Broadly, I would say the two main areas I work on are commercial women's fiction and reading group fiction, but I do work on a few thriller books as well. So every now and then on this channel I make a video about books that I've been working on lately. I think I've done 2 of these so far since I've been working at Bonnier, working on fiction. I used to work in non-fiction before, so I'll link those 2 videos down below. And then today I have 10 books I wanted to talk to you about, all of which I've been working on lately. All of these books are publishing or have published from sort of March to July, so most of these are out already, but some of them are not quite out but will be out very soon. So I have 10 books to talk to you about today, and I'll start off with the books publishing under the Zaffa imprint, which is the kind of commercial imprint of Bonnier Books UK. So the first book I want to mention is Time to Say Goodbye by Rosie Goodwin, which came out in March. This is a saga novel. If you don't know what saga is a wonderful genre that I've really come to love since working on it. It's basically very commercial, plot-led historical fiction, mostly set in the 19th and 20th century, focusing on young women kind of battling with their social and economic situations. It's a wonderful genre. Time to Say Goodbye is set between the 30s and the 40s, and quite a lot of it dwells on World War II. We follow a family, a mother and her daughter and her adopted daughter, who start off at the beginning of the book kind of living in a fairly nice house, having quite a lot of money, and what happens when they lose all of that, and the Second World War happens at the same time, as well as so many complicated, dramatic family relationships. It's a really wonderful book. All of Rosie Goodwin's novels are really moving and really warm and lovely, and I just really enjoy working on her books. Another book that we published back in March is A Year in the Chateau by Sarah Long. This is a commercial women's fiction novel focusing on a group of people in their 50s and 60s who decide to do something a bit different with their retirement. They group together, the 7 of them, and they buy a chateau in France, and they move there to live there as a group in a kind of giant house share, but in a chateau. And the book looks at them kind of settling into their new life and all the complications that come with it and how their friendships and relationships change as well. It's really good fun and it is incredibly funny. The next book I want to mention, which came out in April, is Greek Island Escape by Patricia Wilson. This is an escapist fiction novel set across England and Greece. It has a dual narrative looking at the history of Greece in a really interesting way, while also focusing on these 2 women, both of whom are looking for their daughters. Zoe, in the present day, her daughter has run away and she's scouring the UK trying to find her. And then Sophia, in the present day, we know that she's given up her daughter and we don't know why. And then in the past, in the mid 20th century, we're finding out why she had to give up her daughter. So it's a really great read. I always enjoy a dual narrative, and Patricia Wilson's books are always full of excitement and drama as well. The next novel I want to mention is another saga one, and that is The Secrets of Ironbridge by Molly Walton. This is the second book in a series, and the series focuses around the town of Ironbridge in Shropshire. So The Secrets of Ironbridge is set in the 1850s, and we follow a young woman called Beatrice who comes to England for the first time. She's grown up in France. So her and her mother travel back to her mother's birthplace, Ironbridge, where Beatrice discovers that her family are much more sort of upper middle class than her upbringing has been, and they own the local brickworks, and they don't seem to treat their workers as well as Beatrice would like. And then Beatrice meets and falls in love with a young man who is a brickmaker. So the book kind of follows their love story and all the kind of complicated class issues behind it. I really enjoyed working on this one. The Ironbridge saga series by Molly Walton really quite reminds me of North and South by Elizabeth Gaskell. Molly Walton is dealing with a lot of really similar issues to Elizabeth Gaskell in terms of like complicated class dynamics in the mid-Victorian period. They're really fascinating books, and I highly recommend The Secrets of Ironbridge and also the first book in this series, which is called The Daughters of Ironbridge. The next book I want to mention came out in May, and that is The House Share by Kate Helm. This is a commercial thriller which follows a young woman called Imi who joins this amazing sounding house share in London where that rent is surprisingly cheap but the house is amazing, huge, with all of these fascinating resources and these other amazing people who all seem to have something really special about them. So she joins this house share incredibly excited to have found sort of the perfect place to live, but of course it's not quite as perfect as it seems, and someone in the house at least is holding a deadly secret. I in general don't read that many thrillers, but actually I really enjoy them when I do read them, and I've really enjoyed working on a few in the last few months. One thing I especially like about the house share is that the characters are in their mid-20s, and I think quite a lot of thrillers are pitched a little bit older, and I really enjoyed the kind of dynamics but between all of these young people and all the kind of complicated, messy relationships between them. Some wonderful characterization here, and it's a really, really gripping read, so I definitely recommend that. I actually have a physical copy of the next one for a change. This is The Catch by T.M. Logan. The paperback's coming out in June and the ebook came out back in April. This is a really, really gripping novel with some wonderful twists and turns. This tells the story of Ed. At the beginning of the book, Ed finally meets his daughter's new boyfriend, Ryan, who he soon learns is actually her new fiance, and they are planning on getting married very soon. But while Abby's new boyfriend Ryan seems to be entirely perfect, and Abby and Ed's wife think that Ryan is entirely perfect, Ed is sure that there is something off about Ryan and he starts to investigate him to try and find out what's going on. Like I said, it's incredibly gripping and I really enjoyed working on this one. The next book I want to mention is The Shelf by Helly Acton. The next book I want to mention is The Shelf by Helly Acton. This comes out in ebook later in June and then their hardback is out in July. So I don't have a hardback copy, but I do have a bound proof of it, which looks really lovely as well, and the final cover is quite similar. The Shelf is a kind of high concept commercial women's fiction novel which is set on a fictional reality TV show called The Shelf. So our main character Amy is being taken on a surprise holiday by her boyfriend. She doesn't know where they're going, but she thinks that he's about to propose, but instead of proposing, what he actually does is break up with her live on television in front of lots of viewers and leaves her on a reality TV program called The Shelf, in which 6 women must all compete to basically be told which of them is the best like girlfriend or wife material, except that of course all of the women within the television show realise how appallingly sexist and awful the whole concept is and try and like take it down from the inside in a really cool way. This is a fantastically feminist novel which looks really powerfully at kind of pressure on women to behave in a certain way, to live their life in a certain way, to kind of tick off certain life goals. It brilliantly picks apart sexism in the modern world in so many amazing ways, but it's also incredibly readable and absolutely hilarious. This book has a special place in my heart because it was the first book that my team acquired like after I joined the company. So this is one of the first books I've like seen the whole way through. Like I was there when we acquired it, I'm there when we publish it, I've worked on it from the beginning. Like I remember reading this in 24 hours when it came in on submission, and I remember like all the buzz in the office and how exciting it was. Because like from acquisition to publication does take a little while, this is the first book that I've like been with all the way. So that is especially exciting, and yeah, I can't wait for this one to come out. The next book I want to mention is one that is coming out in July, and that is Below the Big Blue Sky by Anna McPartlin. This is a kind of upmarket women's fiction novel. It is incredibly funny and incredibly moving all at once. It is the sequel to a book called The Last Days of Rabbit Hayes, but it can be read as a standalone. So this novel basically follows the Hayes family after the death of Rabbit Hayes, looking at Rabbit's parents, her brother and sister, her daughter and her best friend, and how all of these people kind of managed to build a new life without Rabbit, this woman who kind of held them all together and was so important in all of their lives. So Rabbit is not in the novel, but she's like a massive presence throughout because we see how all of these people loved her so much and how they all kind of try and learn from her, even though she's no longer there. This novel is in many ways a look at grief, and it is incredibly poignant and powerful, but it's also completely hilarious. The Hayes family are eccentric and bizarre in all the best ways, and it makes for a really, really wonderful read. I remember when I first read this, must be a bit over a year ago, just being in like fits of laughter one moment and then being like near to tears the next. It's a really great read and definitely has all of the emotions packed in. So those are all the novels publishing kind of recently or just about to publish under the imprint Zaffa. But as I mentioned, I also do work on the imprint Manila Press. So I've got two books that I want to talk about from that imprint. The first is Charlotte by Helen Moffat. So I did already talk about this book a little bit in my Jane Austen July announcement video, because it is a Jane Austen retelling. It is a Pride and Prejudice retelling focusing on the character of Charlotte Lucas. Some of it is set during Pride and Prejudice, but most of it is a sequel, effectively, looking at Charlotte Lucas's life, her marriage, her children, her friendship with Elizabeth, and also with Anne de Burgh, which I really, really love, and looking at her life kind of after Pride and Prejudice. It's a really wonderful novel and a fantastic Pride and Prejudice retelling. I love a Pride and Prejudice retelling, and I think Charlotte Lucas is one of the most interesting minor characters in Pride and Prejudice. So this is a really wonderful read. It very interestingly examines the position of women within the early 19th century and sort of how limited their choices were in many ways. So Charlotte is currently out in ebook and audiobook. The hardback's not coming out until September. It's a really fantastic read and I definitely recommend it. And of course it is very suited to Jane Austen July. Helen Moffat is a wonderful writer, and you know how much I love a Jane Austen retelling. The last book I want to mention is out later in June, and that is The Phone Box at the Edge of the World by Laura Ima Messina, translated by Lucy Rand. So this is a wonderful and very unique novel. So it was originally written in Italian, but it is set in Japan and it's being published all over the world. So it's based around a real thing, which is that in Japan there is this real phone box. It's a disconnected phone box in a garden where people go to speak to the people that they have lost. They pick up the telephone and they speak to people who are no longer with them. And this novel follows a woman called Yui, whose mother and daughter both died in the 2011 tsunami. She hears about this phone box on the radio and she travels there to see if it can help her. And when there, she meets a man who also visits the phone box, whose wife has died and whose daughter has stopped speaking in the wake of her loss. And the book looks at their growing friendship, as well as various other people who come to the phone box to speak to the lost. This book is a really beautiful exploration of grief. It is incredibly moving and wonderfully written. But another thing that I really love about it is that it has a really interesting structure where every other chapter is a kind of normal, straightforward chapter, and the chapters in between those have a more unusual form, and there'll be sort of like lists or little snippets of conversations, or like one person's thought or a quote that one of the characters really likes, or something like that, which I think is really, really cleverly done. So definitely recommend this one. It is a really beautiful read. And that's it. Those are the 10 books I wanted to talk to you about that I've been working on recently. Please let me know down in the comments if you've read or heard of any of these books, and if you liked them, especially if you liked them. I'd very much love to know that, because all of these books are very close to my heart. And that's all for now. Thanks so much for watching, and I'll be back very soon with another bookish video.